Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Florida Instructional Designer Network Professional Development Webinar Series. Thank you for joining us today. I am Tom Tu from Florida Virtual Campus. I am your host for the webinar. The FLIDN is brought to you through the partnership with the State University System of Florida, Board of Governors, the Florida College System, independent colleges and universities of Florida, and Florida Virtual Campus. If you haven't done so, please subscribe to the IDN listserv for news, announcements, professional development opportunities, career opportunities, as well as effective practices and rich resources shared by our wonderful community members. The subscription is free for everyone. I will post the subscription link in chat. It only takes 1 minute to subscribe. While the knowledge and the use of open educational practices continue to grow, questions concerning how to leverage and contribute to this global effort rooted in principles of social justice designed to enhance student achievement and promote lifelong learning are often asked. Our guest speaker, Mr. James Paradiso from the University of Central Florida, will take us on a journey to discover our intentional or unintentional relationship with the open education movement, how we might best understand its potential to affect positive change in the lives of our students, faculty, institutions, and ultimately ourselves. Mr. Paradiso is an associate instructional designer and program coordinator of affordable instructional materials for open education at the University of Central Florida's Center for Distributed Learning. Please join me in welcoming Jim to the podium. Jim, please take it over.
Thank you. And before I even share my screen, I just want to see the pictures and some cameras and just respond to a little bit of what I've seen in the chat. Hi. A lot of instructional designers, a lot of people working spread around the country. I'm really happy that we're all here to talk about something that really is important to me as a person, whether or not I was working in it, regardless of whether it's part of my job description or not. This is something that I've had a personal relationship with from before when I was a faculty member, and now as an instructional designer and as a coordinator of something, and then even beyond. So if one day I leave here, it'll always be with me, and it matters to me as a father, as a person, and as a member of this world. So as I talk to you today, just know that I believe most people in open education who care deeply about it, or may even be here today and want to learn about it. That's one thing about this community that's, for me, unprecedented, is the level of care and community that I feel as part of the open education community is something unparalleled for me. So I hope to share some of that with you today. And I'll start my slideshow, and I'm going to try. I didn't prepare a ton of slides because it's a lot of questions or takeaways that people wanted to have from this. And so I would love for you all to personalize it a little bit towards the end if we have time, and really ask some pressing questions that might be able to help you move the needle at your institution, or just answer questions that are important to you. All right, let me share my screen. All right, well, thank you again. As you can see here, this is a picture of University of Central Florida, the reflection pond and the library, if you've never been there. I used to work in the basement of this, the instructional design team, the Center for Distributed Learning was in the basement of this building. And we've graduated. I don't know if it's a graduation, but we've moved on to the research park, where we have kind of our own building, a shared space, but much more space with windows. So I am Jim Paradiso. My Twitter handle's there, and you can also access the slides at that tiny URL, OEP for IDN Webinar. And happy to share them. They're all openly licensed. Please adapt and use again if you find the need later. I want to talk a little bit about open education, just define some terms first, actually define the terms open and education separately, and kind of think of it together here initially. And what does it look like in practice? So Tom kind of gave a little bit of the overview that I had written prior to this session. And so again, I think if you've worked in open education for a while, or even if you're new to it, there's a lot of ways to tackle it. And everyone kind of has their own unique circumstance, funding stream, level of support. And so there isn't really one clean shot, one clear pathway to do it. That's why I think the conversation is always so interesting. What I hope you all get out of this today is I'm going to try to at least give you some of the roadmap from my point of view, and how we plan to make impact or integrate with current infrastructure and contribute back ultimately to the open education community that we also take from, right? So there's that reciprocal relationship. All right, so let's start with kind of open, just to kind of get on the same page here. So the way I use open, and the way I think of open, is that it involves utilizing these teaching and learning materials that are freely available to all without the restriction of proprietary systems or right, oppressive structures that are designed to kind of favor certain groups. As Tom mentioned in the very introduction that I wrote, this is just as much a social justice issue as it is a cost-saving metric on the university side, right? So there's multiple dimensions to this, but open is really kind of honed in on, the way I understand it, is to delimit, right? To no longer have limits on the sharing, in our case, of academic content and the data that surrounds it. And now education, if we kind of pull them apart, education and also open education, right? The reason we do this work, at least the reason I do this work, I can say, is to help, social and economic systems evolve, to help people evolve so they can contribute to those. So as you can see here through a couple of the pictures that I've showed below, through open education, what we're really able to do is, span a large group and a large, landscape of the educational space, and hope that through all of us collaborating together, we will contribute and make something better together. Because after all, we do learn a lot from each other. I think someone may be unmuted as well. So I spoke of this journey, and it makes me think, this picture is like kind of very representative of how I feel sometimes, right? There's a clear path forward. There are a lot of resources out there, and there's a hill to climb. We can see it. We know what some of the issues are. But the question always becomes, how are we going to get there? Do we have enough rations to make it? What vehicle are we going to use, right? Just imagine anything, right? If you're standing on this road, or in a car, even on this road, or a bicycle, where are you going? How do you get there? What's the most efficient way? And how do you survive in the process? And there's a lot of work that's going to be involved. You can tell getting over that mountain or the place we want to go, it's going to require a lot of work. It's very representative of what open education is like. And so to me, again, the reason why this webinar is important and talking about these matters are important is that together really is how we're going to get there, at least most efficiently, and most equitably, right, at the end of the day. So that's kind of my intro spiel on why open education is important. And I'd like to take just a breather and ask if y'all could place in the chat, get just a kind of a climate for me to know who we all are. Does your current role require, like your job description require that you work in open education? If you could reply with a Y or an N for yes or no, or an NS if you're even not sure, or still trying to figure out if it's part of your job. I was in that space for a while too. That could be really helpful. I'm going to pull it up here just in the chat while I'm looking. Okay, I see some, mathematical sort of symbols next to some of the answers, and I see some other not sures, and I try, and I feel you. It seems like it's a pretty even split, so I think that's really good. That's really interesting. I think we have a lot to probably share with each other, and we can complement each other, right? At the end of the day, we don't all want to be the same or at the same level, right? Because it makes it much more interesting and it helps us all grow. So I have one more, if you wouldn't mind, to answer. How would you rank your level of experience, whether it's part of your job title or not, or part of your description? On our lowest being 0, and the highest sort of being 5. I'd love to hear where y'all are at. Great. Also a pretty large spread. So 7. I like that. I might have to have you do a webinar for me later after this one. So thank you. Great. Well, I appreciate y'all taking time to do that, and gives me a little bit of an indication of who's on the call and where we're all coming from. So I'm going to take this in 3 segments, because I had 3 bullet points for takeaways, and then I'm really I'd like to open it up to really have a conversation. So the first thing I really wanted to unpack a little bit for everyone, at least from where I stand, is, when we plan to operationalize some open education initiative projects or whatever, this question always comes up, especially depending what stream, we're getting asked to do it from, if it's a grassroots thing, or we've been approached by someone, or if it's a top-down thing and we've been approached by someone, or if we just decided in our heart one day, we woke up and decided to do it for some reason that wasn't being told to us why. This question of for whom and by whom, I think, is always a really important one to consider. And so where I'm at, and I think this is pretty broadly applicable. I mean, you have, at least in higher ed, you have administrators, students, instructors, and support teams that support any of those: the instructors, the students, the administrators, and supporting themselves even, right? So, and so some of these lines are clear, right? So like from instructor to student, I mean, everyone understands that in higher education, this is kind of the main line of communication. Instructors are communicating with their students. When we get into initiatives that generate revenue or that cost money and impact student success, everyone is going to get involved, right? As it's important for the institution. So, and I tried to leave this kind of the same color here so that we could kind of visualize arrows within the arrows, or streams within the arrows, of administrators telling instructors, whether that's the department chair or the dean or the provost, kind of raining down some information to an instructor, and how that bleeds over into students, or how the support team, a stream might come up there and funnel into the instructor arrow when they need to support the department wanting to do an open education initiative or whatever other type of initiative. And then also, which sometimes gets left out, is the student stream of communication, information, and just, emotional taxation or whatever cognitive overload that they might feel from all of the agendas from the 3 people on the left: the support teams, the instructors, the administrators, and their own lives, right? So I want you to keep this in mind as I go through the next few slides. I'm going to unpack each of them and kind of show you how the communication occurred for open education and affordability more broadly at UCF. So there were grassroots things happening at UCF prior to this initiative that I'm showing you here. But a day came along a few years ago where it was a charge given, and it's a provost level supported thing now, supported at least in spirit, that we want to reduce the cost of educational materials. And if that can lead to better student outcomes, better still, right? Let's try to record that and make some impact here. So it's really great. It's a really great motive to do something. And so this was designed collectively from our group at the Center for Distributed Learning, with input from a lot of people, to say, well, this is kind of what it's going to look like, right? We have this initiative called Affordable Instructional Materials, and it's supported by, First Day, which is the Barnes & Noble Inclusive Access Program, OER, which is that second pillar, library sourced materials that are subsidized through, contracts or whatever. And then Affordability Counts, which some of you from Florida may know, is a sort of recognition system, a badging system to celebrate faculty members who partake of affordable instructional materials initiatives. So that was the call, right? And so on the administrator chain, right, on the administrator line of communication, it was that is the thing that's going to happen. And then we have, so let's start now. And we see that stream of communication coming down. Now from the instructor side, we have a stream of communication or a stream of expectation, right, in terms of what their goals are. And their goals are to teach students, among other things. One of their goals are to teach students. And so they want students to, I put feed your head here, it's just a catchy little thing. But in order to do that, what do you need to do? Maybe buy some books, buy some good books, better yet, the ones that I assign or created or whatever. You also come to lectures so I can explain complicated stuff. I don't know what's on that board. Maybe some of you all do, who are in engineering or math or something, wherever that comes from. And then we also, have an expectation that students will come together at some point and talk with each other to help them understand what the individual may not understand on their own, right? So in the publishing industry and just whether it's open publishers, proprietary, big box publishers, the goal is the same, right? To teach students and to create a learning experience for them, and to help offload some of the stress of teaching high enrollment classes, which occur a lot in online learning. But even face-to-face, you could have big lecture halls of hundreds of students that these pedagogies and resources help to increase learning and efficiency around those topics. And so that's kind of where the instructor for communication kind of comes from in terms of my model, at least. So you have instructors talking from that angle, administrators talking up from that top angle, and then we have students voice as well. And these are like real pictures of students and things that are happening at UCF. There's a student group that I mentor called the Wiki Nights, and one of their goals is to work on open education stuff. And these are from actually yesterday, these pictures. They were out in front of our student union, kind of just getting some data around textbooks and affordability, and just trying to start a conversation with students to talk about how they're feeling about how it's going. In addition to this stuff that I didn't have pictures of were surveys, and they're taking inventory of more things than just cost, but also, attrition in terms of class load, and more of this emotional things occurring potentially in addition to cost. So students do have something to say, and something that I learned very early on, kind of mentoring a student group a few years ago. I was approached by a student to do this, and this is where this came from, was that, they feel very overloaded, and I don't want to say disempowered. I don't know if that's the right term, but they definitely don't feel, in my experience, that when they say something, someone's going to listen and they could actually change something or stop something from happening that's not desirable to them. But so that got put to the test. They had in Florida here for inclusive access programs, we had an opt-in program, which is very different than the rest of the country. Most of these inclusive access programs, students are opted in automatically, and they opt out if they don't want to participate. Here it was different until a year or so ago when legislation was passed that there was an option, right? State schools can choose whether they want to be opt-in or opt-out. And there was that consideration was being made at our institution as well, and students had something to say about it. And they took it upon themselves to come together and state their opinion about it. And they did talk to me about it, and they felt that it may not make a difference. Their voice may not be heard. But, as any, good human, I think we encourage our fellows to pursue the sort of injustices they may feel around something that's important to them, and whether or not that would materialize into anything. But as some of you may know, if you're from Florida or if you don't, they made a petition. They used social media platforms and Reddit to kind of get their bug in the ear of others and see what the response would be. And there was a resounding sort of, 1,000+ signatures on the petition. And their activism around this topic was ultimately heard through focus groups initially that were kindly set up by our administration to kind of hear what students had to say. And then they just kept going with it and eventually walked into the provost office themselves and just asked, would you please not move forward with this at current? And there was a UCF Today article that even came out about how we're keeping the model. So I spent a little more time on this than the others, but I think this is an under investigated area, or even talked about area. A lot of us don't have our feet in both pots, and I just happen to have my feet on, I guess, both sides of the fence. I use pots, but you kind of get what I'm saying. So where I work directly with students, I work directly with faculty, I work directly with administrators on open education stuff. So it gives me a very unique lens to look through. And I wanted to share this with you all, that for you to feel empowered, but for you to also share with your those that you work with in open, that getting students involved, it just takes one. I mean, this guy in the middle with the white shirt and a black mask came up to me one day and met me in the library, and that's how we started this conversation. And it ended up making a big shift in a potential sort of like regulation at our university. So it starts small, but it can really grow large into large things, small things. Again, it's not that reduction is sort of cause and effect. If we're small, we can't make a big impact. This is a complex system. Humanity and our institutions are very complex. And if you know the butterfly effect, right? I mean, there's a breaking point, right? If the last piece of rice on the pile of a large pile of rice could make the whole thing tumble. And sometimes you're at that point and you can't see it. So something to keep in mind. And now to support that last sort of bottom stream of communication coming up. And this is kind of where I spend most of my time, helping faculty and students create open resources to share back with the community or to use within their classes. And we have a few tools. The first two are in-house that we've developed and are available on GitHub. So anyone can fork them and stand them up on their own instance. We could even help you, I suppose. Those are vehicles for us to publish. Materia is more like a kind of like a widgets, right? So interactives. And Obojobo is like learning objects where you can create these sort of bite-sized, learning focused, where you can deliver content in bite-sized fashion. Some of you may have heard of Pressbooks. We also have a paid hosted version of Pressbooks that's branded. And I manage that network, and we do a lot of very interesting projects through there with, like I said, students, instructors, even external people. We just did a program for an international conference in there. And it was all kind of in French, and it was really fun. And again, you could see that on our UCF Pressbooks website if you just Google it. But that's not enough, right? I don't think we could really get traction with just having some platforms and some people to help faculty author in there. We also have the benefit of having a faculty multimedia center with a light board that they can create their own videos. We have graphics teams that create all the Pressbooks book covers, that help redesign images and other figures. And we have a video team that you can record your lectures on and get professional grade stuff. And we have a Tech Ranger team, which are basically largely student programming students, who help me a lot with authoring in Pressbooks for sure. And just everything from HTML to custom CSS to writing Python scripts to help automate formatting of books that we maybe cloned from other servers. And so it really helps us with our adaptation work in terms of OER adaptation. So if you have this sort of infrastructure, and even if you don't, it's helpful to really have some semblance of support if you want to tick along at a pace that people have patience for. And I'm not saying that to say that people are inherently impatient, but faculty and courses and policies, a lot of stuff moves quickly, and things change quickly. My motto is always try to be out on the front edge of it, on the tip of it, and I think that really helps with impact. So that takes us into impact, and executing all this takes work, as I've just explained. But the work, it isn't in vain. At least we've seen some very good feedback from the work that we've done. Our Vice Provost of Digital Learning spoke about it on an EDUCAUSE podcast, some of the student authored work that we're doing around intersections of environment and community, and in COVID times particularly. And we also, in fall 2020, got the entire physics department essentially at the Gen Ed Physics 2053-54, for those of you in Florida, to utilize the Pressbooks version of OpenStax and basically make a zero cost across the board impact for all students taking their courses during fall. And it wound up saving students roughly $750,000. And I was even able to write a UCF Today article that you can, again, look up, or you can click when you get the slides, you can click into that. And their work was really, really important. And it even won an award. We have a virtual event, an AIM High virtual event, AIM meaning Affordable Instructional Materials event, hosted through the Pegasus Innovation Lab. And they had the president come and award them. And if it's not too much trouble, I've shared my sound. Please let me know if you can't hear it, but I'm going to try to play an excerpt from his speech, so to speak, because I really think that it hits home in a lot of ways.
This work grew exponentially this year, with almost 20 faculty members from the department joining the effort. As certainly, and we reported that in a recent UCF Today story. However, the true impact is best measured not by numbers, but by the words of our students. In the article, Health Sciences major Emily Sierra shares how this impacted her personally. To have a professor who cared enough to put in the hours of work to make the supplies free, especially in the midst of the scariest and most uncertain times our generation has faced in history, made me feel seen as a student, she says. It motivated me to push that much harder when studying, because I knew he did very clearly care about our success as students. So the award, the physics department, let me see if I can get it right again, and I hope it's showing up the right way, but if we get the angle right, there it is for the.
So I hope y'all were able to hear that. Again, when the president's able to come on and kind of applaud something, it's really special, and I feel really honored to be part of that. And again, stuff that starts really small. I mean, I was approached by one faculty member, and it had this, and the department chair was obviously very supportive, of course. None of this would be possible without him and the faculty members all as well. But it kind of all came down to having a couple of conversations that just really changed the flow, and having Pressbooks, even though we didn't need Pressbooks, we could have used OpenStax, and some did. Not all faculty used Pressbooks or even OpenStax, but having these tools and having the sort of vision that we have a way to quickly scale something. We have teams to create question sets, to convert them from an OpenStax question bank or something. That was all really, really critical and important. And all of the little pieces together kind of added up into this equation where we ended making this impact. And lastly, again, collaborating internally, obviously here. So we collaborate with our Pegasus Innovation Lab, with faculty, with the divisions, with colleges, and we've also collaborated. We have an instructional design subgroup of 5 people who helped contribute to this introduction to open education, to kind of give a very, again, this is openly available on Canvas Commons. If you look it up, you can use it or adapt it. We did the same, adapted it from I think Paradise Valley Community College or something. And again, all these little things adding up may seem small, but together they make something happen. And so, and I'd be remiss to not mention a great experience I've recently had with Spark in their Open Education Leadership Program, and that collaboration there. And it's not the only way you can externally collaborate, but it was one thing that I pursued. And maybe if y'all are interested in open education, it used to only be open to librarians, but the year when they opened it up to everyone, I applied and was thankful to get in, and joined me and 20 others here joined together, and one of the greatest experiences of my life. And we're still working together. Here's an example of something that we've all graduated from the program now, but we're still working on stuff. As you can see here, one of the things that myself and this other member of the community, Lee, are working on here is that bridge between instructional support that a lot of us as instructional designers and others do, and librarian support. We don't always talk to each other. We do at UCF, and we're thankful to have even a textbook affordability librarian and others who care about this. But how do we care together, and how do we work together to meet our goals as professionals, to help our community, to help our external and internal communities, and to help students and faculty get what they need. And so this graphic is also going to be shared. We're publishing on it right now, so it's not shared publicly yet, but you can still access it and revise it. And I'd love to see iterations of this graphic, because I don't posit to know everything about that relationship, and I would love to see some others add to it. And obviously at the bottom corner, you can kind of see, I think working on grants is something that is really important, and I would love to work with anyone on this call and on grants, whether it's the Department of Ed grant that I know Senator Durbin recently they announced that they're, I guess, in final decisions here on passing it into law, but another, however odd million towards federal funding. And then obviously you have philanthropic agencies like the Hewlett Foundation, who also support and are very supportive of open education. And there are opportunities there, and they want to fund projects in this space. So yeah, please, not a plug, but let's work together. I think that's really going to make it work. I'm almost through my slides here. I don't know what time it is, so hopefully I have a few more moments, and it's still time for Q&A. So, again, I've given a lot of information. I've talked about a lot of different scenarios. It's a very large thing to manage, right? Open education impacts a lot of people, and it has a lot of meaning in a lot of different circles. And I mean, it even means something to for-profit publishing companies, right? Everyone is chiming in and trying to get on the train, and whether they're trying to make money off it or trying to offer it for free, I mean, not to judge right or wrong, it's just complex. There's a lot of players involved and a lot of different voices in the game. So lastly, I'd like to just talk about, I think we do a pretty decent job of finding open educational resources, sharing them with each other, sharing them with faculty, using them in courses, and all that's great. But what I've seen happen, what I think is really important, is to remember, as instructional designers especially, that when we work with faculty to help them implement open educational resources, or if we even do a zero textbook cost program, right, where we reduce costs and use open educational resources to do that, that we remember that even though we don't have to share back, it's a good idea maybe to consider sharing back the modifications and the enhancements and whatever, even if you've used it again in your use case in and of itself, whether or not you change the materials, your story is worth something to people who haven't gone through that journey yet. And that's part of impact, and that's part of coming full circle with open, and what I think is really important, and I hope we don't forget. There are a lot of ways to contribute. I mean, whether it's adding your OER to OER Commons, whether it's publishing in like the IJOER, the International Journal of OER, putting your stuff on Humanities Commons, even being part of, I was at the Open Ed conference, I don't know, whenever that was, seems like a lifetime ago, but it was very recent. I talked with someone from Montgomery College, and there's other Maricopa and some others that are working on aligning with the UN Sustainable Development Goals and open pedagogy. And from what I understand, they're open to collaborating. It's not a closed system. If you want to be part of that, you can be. So again, another way to contribute, the Open Ed Leadership Program from Spark, that's another way. And even the Doers 3, if you haven't heard of that, it's a network of institutions and very smart, motivated, and caring people working on helping build OER into promotion and tenure. How is OER an equity game changer, right? Like all of these sort of things, they're creating rubrics and materials about it. And that's another community. As an institution, you can reach out and maybe become part of something like that, right? It's a cooperative. I've noted a lot here because I did see a lot of questions and takeaways that people had in the beginning. Tom shared those with me. These are just some resources. I couldn't fit any more on the page. But there are a ton for promotion, tenure, research, publishing, equity, pedagogy, training, just generally. Please access these in the slides. And if you don't know about them, utilize them. And they'll help you maybe get to where you want to go. And so that's it. At the very bottom, I have our webpage that we stood up, and you could just Google again, CDL Open Practices. And yeah, and there's my email if you wanted to reach out.